Good afternoon, everybody. We'll give it just another minute or two to make sure that we get everybody on this afternoon. Thanks so much, Patrick, for being here. I'm just going to give it another minute. I see folks are still jumping on, so we'll just give it another minute or so and we'll get going. Okay, well, for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and get going. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for making the time to be here today and welcome. It's the first meeting of 2024 for the Outdoor Recreation Advisory Council meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. I'm going to go through the introduction pretty quick today because we've got a guest speaker. Patrick Harrington is here with us from the Office of Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Office. Patrick's the manager there, and he's got a pretty firm timeline of how much time he can spend with us. So I want to make sure to get it over to him pretty quickly so that he can share some information about some of the stuff that Wyoming is working on. Let's see with that, Patrick, just as way of introduction, this is our advisory council for Oregon's Office of Outdoor Recreation. And thanks again so much for making the time to be here. Patrick and I have talked a couple of times over the last, I don't know, a couple of months, and he's got some pretty cool things going on over in Wyoming. And I thought it might be really helpful for him to share some of that with us. So with that, Patrick, I'll hand it over to you, and you go as long as you feel like you can until you need to head out.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Appreciate you all having me today. Again, Patrick Harrington, manager of the Wyoming Office of Outdoor Recreation. I'm Wyoming State Director for Outdoor Recreation. By way of a bit of an origin story, I grew up in Wyoming. Tried to move to Oregon. It was my trip out west. I thought west is best, go farther. But Wyoming got its hands on me at the last minute and really sucked me back into the state. And now I'll probably, at least if I can help it, never live anywhere else. But I'm a skier, a fly fisherman, hiker, camper, and in my season as a Capricorn right now. As Matt mentioned, I do have an out a little bit before 3:20 to pick up my kid at his kindergarten class. So I'd like to leave maybe a little time if there's questions at the end. But I'll just hop into a bit of an explanation of what our office is and some of the ways we've been successful here in Wyoming. Our office started out of a 2017 task force report convened by former Governor Matt Mead, became a member of the Confluence of States and had our office stood up in 2018. We're one of the original states in the Confluence of States as well. We are housed within state parks and cultural resources. This is sort of what has been a unique perspective for outdoor recreation offices statewide, but we're starting to see additional states currently having conversations about formation of an office in Tennessee and in North Dakota, along the same lines of the Wyoming office, looking at how does state parks sort of absorb this work and really turn it loose to do the good things it's trying to. What we really found in Wyoming and the rationale for it being there was, one, we had statutory authority so that we could work outside of state parks and historic site landscapes. And then also the state parks was a do something agency, and that real practical in getting things done. And that's become a through line in our office, that sort of the actions speak louder than words perspective. So I'll go through a number of the ways that we are trying to achieve that here in Wyoming here in a second, but I'll also say that my office exists sort of complementary to our recreational motorized trails program in Wyoming. So that is at a similar position as myself. We work very closely together. That has our recreational trails program and land and water conservation fund granting in it. But there are currently conversations moving forward about aligning all of us under one deputy director in state parks. Currently 5 full-time employees and 4 seasonals. Those 4 seasonals are year-round. It's really a clever way that state government in Wyoming is getting around a capacity limit of how many state employees we can have at any one point. Like Utah, our office is gaining a bunch of steam, and I think that tease of maybe some alignment with our state trails program is some of what we're seeing, and we see additional capacity here in our state parks department for outdoor recreation to stand up even further, to have a broader sphere of influence, and work towards that global domination plan. But for now, we are the size we are. In Wyoming, tourism is our number 2 industry as well. We have a tremendous amount of support from our Office of Tourism. About half of our operating budget comes from them, and to date, all of the grant money that our office is giving out that is not federal has come from our Office of Tourism, though they're not very thumb on the scale with us in that everything is tourism focused all the time. They certainly let us get in our lane and do the work we're trying to do, with an understanding that it is good for outdoor recreation for the folks that live next to the trails or campgrounds, but it also has a draw for outsiders coming in and that visitor economy here in the state. So some of the ways, and I'll say too, if you have questions as we go, please feel free to hop in. But some of the ways we're achieving our mission and trying to move the ball for outdoor recreation in Wyoming. First, and I'll start with what the first action of our office really was, and that was to convene an interagency team focused on outdoor recreation. And so in Wyoming, this is me as the state parks cultural resources representative, an employee charged with special projects from our Department of Transportation, Game and Fish, Office of State Lands and Investments, Business Council, Office of Tourism, and then we have a outdoor recreation, tourism, and hospitality initiative at the University of Wyoming, the only 4-year institution in the state. And so they come and go as needed, as does our Department of Health, Homeland Security, which coordinates our search and rescue statewide, and then Department of Education. Those are as needed. We bring those groups in, and this group started as a director level conversation before my time, but my understanding is there was a lot of hot air in the room and things were not necessarily moving forward. And so that was bumped down to a deputy director level, and eventually that was loosened up to just being the most effective person in an agency doing that work to move the needle for outdoor recreation. And what this has really done in Wyoming is coalesce the power across state government so that we're all aligned and all pushing in the same direction. And so when we talk about grant funds from the Office of Tourism, those are a product of this interagency team. And then a lot of the boxes we check every year, the reports we deliver to the governor have to do with this interagency team and the work being done, ultimately leading to those outcomes being directly within what was that 2017 outdoor recreation task force report that was generated. And so that's part of how we are knocking those items off the list. But that's honestly endless work, and we could do it forever and not finish the list. So this is also the venue for addressing whatever the issue of the day is. When Yellowstone flooded a couple of summers ago, this was the team that had an emergency meeting and really drove a strategy to rehome those tourists and to do our best working with the federal agencies to make sure that the state was represented in those conversations as well. But really delivers the full weight of Wyoming state government. We do a ton of policy work. This ebbs and flows depending on who are in seats in Washington, D.C. and what types of actions are being taken. But our office coordinates a recreation approach for these federal, whatever it is, rocks. We're currently, I just finished the letter this morning for the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, which has been incredibly controversial in Wyoming. And so our office is carrying that perspective statewide and making sure we represent state government there as well. Another activity of our office that has seemed to get a lot of attention for maybe being a somewhat unique style of government function is our community collaboratives, and we have 8 of these outdoor recreation collaboratives across the state. We're just opening our 8th right now in Sheridan and Johnson County up in the northern part of the state along the Bighorns. These groups are intended to be an opportunity for some of that grass tops leadership and really driving information from a community level up to state government. In Wyoming, it's a very local driven defensive anti-government state. And so having that grassroots leadership has been really helpful in helping move the needle. And so these groups are just community leaders, folks invested in the recreation space, probably not too dissimilar from this group right now, except for all tied to a common place on the map. And so they get together, talk big ideas, arm wrestle a little bit, make sure that all user groups are included. It's helped a lot with burying the hatchet between a motorized, non-motorized conflict in the state, and then just general, use areas, user group conflicts. And really what they do together is dream up big ideas for their community and then work to achieve those. And so they're a challenge, eyes wide open. And for full disclosure, very hard to coordinate these groups and to keep them ongoing. I think if we had a chance to do it all over again, there's certainly lessons learned there. But having a strategic planning process that never ends is as challenging as it sounds. But some of that payoff is significant, and we're not just getting products on the ground and new development, but we're also building champions and partners, which when we come from this from a political perspective has been hugely influential in the state, to have folks in every single community that we can call and who can share personal messages with legislators or the governor's office or whoever needs to hear from them. This has been really powerful in a way that we're not convening our own lobbying. Obviously, that's against our rules, but in a way that folks just understand the language and we're all drawn from the same well. We've been working really hard to develop grant funding. We successfully passed in the last legislative session here in Wyoming the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund, intended to provide ongoing funding for these community collaboratives as they develop projects. We're still working this bill through this legislative session, which starts in just a couple of weeks here in Wyoming, but I'm working on the governance pieces and establishing a board through statutory authority right now. But the funding exists, $6 million of biennium ongoing until that corpus reaches $200 million. We expect it not to just be $6 million a year. We expect to develop funding externally, but as it sits now, that's where it's at. We'll probably start paying out of that in July of 2024. So that's coming right up. And it's going to be a big lift, but we're real excited. Thank you for that question, Steph. The funding mechanism there, again, this is another place to call out the support of the Office of Tourism in Wyoming. We passed a lodging tax a few years ago. That now funds the Office of Tourism, which is no longer on the state general fund. So they have now a surplus in that budget, and that goes into a special projects and reserve account, which currently sits about $9 million a year, $18 million a biennium. And so we get $6 million of that going into this account. We have a great champion in the director of the Office of Tourism, and that's been really instrumental in moving this ball forward. So again, that Office of Tourism has been huge in making this happen. Again, that's our second largest industry in Wyoming. Largely, that's focused around outdoor recreation, so we really fit together quite nicely. We also have directed some ARPA funding, though that's been an extreme challenge that, quite frankly, I just don't want to talk about. It's no fun, but we are getting some money to the ground. We've got 6 projects out there now, and we're about to close our second round of funding. And then we have some other funding from the Office of Tourism directly related to funding projects out of those collaboratives. We understand that the way to get these collaboratives to move is to get the carrot at the end of the stick, and that carrot is often funding. And so it's always funding. And so having that out there, I think will really help with the efficiency of those groups. Another piece we've taken to is storytelling. So one of our early hires in my office was an outreach and marketing coordinator, and collectively, her and I have focused in on her role really being obviously driving partnerships both into our agency and out of our agency, but also in how do we tell our story, how do we shape narratives across the state and elevate the voice of outdoor recreation. Her work is, I mean, she's a clear number 2 in our office, and couldn't do it without her, both as a person and her role. So really just a strong pitch for being able to tell that story in an outdoor recreation office is a solid way to be effective and to really turn those words into actions. And then the last piece I'll just touch on that you all are probably aware of, but is really the power of the confluence of states and what they've done for Wyoming. We've had a ton of success related to this group, both in shaping federal legislation and in championing the work that's going on here in Wyoming, and hearing from big organizations that have that national or international perspective, but maybe are headquartered here in Wyoming, or have a strong presence in Wyoming. They've really been able to engage at a different level because of the confluence of states. And for the confluence of states, there's those 5 metrics. You need a state director declaring that you have an office, things that Oregon's already taken on and done, and then hitting those 4 pillars. But underneath that, there's a broad amount of leeway to achieve work in the way that makes sense for your state. And that's why we've been so effective here in Wyoming as a partner to this group. It's really helped us elevate our public image. It's helped us give the governor credit nationally for actions done. And so really we just, I will always plant that flag and say the confluence of states has been incredible, and it's something that we'll continue to do. I realized I talked 1,000 miles an hour trying to get all that out, but maybe I have time for a question or two if there are any. And Matt, thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Yeah, and if anybody has a question, you can either put it in the chat or unmute. We'd love to hear.
And I'll also just throw my contact information in the chat here real quick, in case I have to hop off before we get to you. And I'm a phone call or email away, and happy to take one anytime. Sorry, it's hard for me to chew and walk gum at the same time, but there it is.
So you mentioned all the support from the tourism commission. I can't remember if commission is your word or not, but in your state, will you just break down again a little bit in terms of your office, your staffing, kind of where the funding comes from in terms of different agency budgets or the general state budget?
As the state director, my budget is covered by the State Parks Cultural Resources General Fund. I have one other position who runs community collaboratives, who is also funded by the State General Fund. And then the other 3 in my office are, scratch that. I have a non-motorized trails coordinator who's also general funded. And then the other 2, so the marketing outreach coordinator and another collaborative administrator, are both funded by about half that budget coming from the Office of Tourism. And then all of our seasonals are on that Office of Tourism funding. And that also covers all of our operating expenses.
Thanks for that clarification.
Absolutely.
Patrick, my name is Matthew Drake. I'm with Mounted Meadows. I'm curious about recreational immunity in the state of Wyoming and the status of releases.
So I saw that on your agenda. And I have no idea what recreational immunity is, so maybe I could get enlightened by some Oregonians.
Well, I'm sure that others in your state are watching our state, as most states are, but this has to do with the release for ordinary negligence, by an operator or a guide outfitter, a municipality, a state agency, etc., for outdoor recreation, or really any recreation activities that are sponsored by an entity. And in Oregon, that release has now been compromised to the point where many recreation service providers cannot get insurance. They can't afford it if they could get it, or they simply cannot get it because the recreation or the insurance companies won't pursue them.
Wyoming has, I'll answer this and I'm unfortunately going to have to hop off, but Wyoming does have recreation protection laws that, keep that liability off of the landowner unless there is truly negligence that can be demonstrated. It's not something that we've had much of an issue with. I'm going to knock on some wood yet. We don't see a lot of those lawsuits in Wyoming. But really, I think that that law is pretty broad. I'd be happy to do a little digging and send off to Matt, and he can maybe forward out to this group what Wyoming is doing, and I can maybe follow up in a little bit more of a robust way that way.
Thank you. That would be very helpful.
Best of luck on your discussion there today.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Patrick. I know you got to get going, and I don't want to keep you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and meet with us.
Happy to do it, Matt, and yeah, best of luck to you all. I'm here if you need me.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. I know we talked about having somebody from one of the other offices come in during our last meeting, and so I've been talking with Patrick about a couple of other things, and so I thought he would be a good one to have in. I know we also talked again at that last meeting about having somebody kind of from the national level come in, so I'll work on that maybe for our March meeting. And if you have any other recommendations on folks that you think would be helpful, just let me know that. So moving on the agenda, I want to make sure that we have time. I know this is going to be probably a pretty healthy discussion around recreational immunity. I put 25 minutes on here. I know we could probably go on for a lot longer. I don't have a ton of information to share with the group, but I thought this would be a good group to have some dialogue, to be able to share some information if you have things that you want to be able to share. So this is really, especially in regards to the most recent ruling for the Fields versus City of Newport that I think you're probably all aware of. I wanted to share where OPRD is at, and really, again, not a ton to share. We're in conversations with Department of Justice and the governor's office. I think those conversations are ongoing. In terms of our operations on the Oregon State Parks side of the house, we're not at this point closing trails or anything of that matter. I just thought, again, that this would be a good discussion. I unfortunately don't have a ton to share, but I thought it would be a good place just to open it up to the group to talk through if you have information that you feel would be helpful for this discussion. I was almost going to say, Steph, I'm sure you have some information that would be beneficial.
Restoring recreational immunity in Oregon with a legislative fix is the #1 2024 legislative priority for Oregon Trails Coalition. We have been very hopeful that we would see language on this and the civil omnibus bill getting introduced in the Senate Judiciary Committee this afternoon in a meeting that starts in 7 minutes. That's still the hope. I think there is a wide range of thoughts among legislators about how big of an emergency this is. On the Oregon Trails Coalition perspective, we see it as a major emergency, and that a number of communities have already closed trails out of concern for this increased level of liability and risk. A number of other communities are making that consideration. We expect to see trail projects that are in the development process slow or halt as agencies and other land managers weigh this potential increased risk. But I think we don't know quite yet of if there is really going to be a viable legislative vehicle for getting this done in 2024 or not. That is still very much our hope, and we're going to continue working towards that outcome. But maybe I'll pause there for what other folks want to share or report.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I guess I'll go on behalf of the private enterprises that represent the folks that provide outdoor recreation services in the state of Oregon. And at the risk of sounding like Chicken Little, this is an existential threat to our existence. And it is nothing less. And it is a shocking revelation at the highest level that our state is controlled not by the legislature or by the governor or the combination thereof, but by the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association. And that's why it is so difficult to even get legislation advanced to even have a hearing. And my greatest fear is that this is going to languish and take so much time that by the time it actually even gets a hearing, we will have lost so many rec service providers in the state of Oregon and have additional mega awards. We have a case going to trial in April. I think Bachelor's got 2 cases going to trial in the spring, all of which could have, really substantial 7-figure awards. And I can tell you on behalf of our fine company, our carrier for many years has exited the state of Oregon. We're on to a new carrier who has entered the state with great trepidation. And if there was a major incident or whatever under this policy that we have now, which terms out on June 30th, it's possible we would not have insurance, which means we could not operate, nor could we get financing.
Is starting to type it in the chat, but I do think it's also helpful for us to distinguish in this conversation between recreational liability and recreational immunity, which both I'd say our coalition and our outdoor rec business partners kind of see as 2 sides of the same coin and very related issues. But the recreational liability issue applies to partners who have some kind of waiver or fee for use, and having those waivers stand up in court, absolutely necessary for our guides and outfitters and ski areas and gyms and all of those outdoor rec businesses. And then there's the recreational immunity issue, which applies to lands where folks are being provided access to those lands free of any charge. And it applies to, the current law is written, applies the same to public and private landowners. So cities, counties, parks, districts, land trusts, private landowners that provide a trails easement, etc. The legislative vehicle that we thought are still hoping for in 2024 is pretty focused on recreational immunity as opposed to recreational liability, though there are many of us working in coalition to try to tackle both issues, to try to educate legislators about both those issues and find a solution to both of them. But just want to clarify for any questions folks have that there's kind of 2 issues at play, kind of different statutes and such apply.
Yeah, that's a good, important clarification. I would further add on the recreational liability side, it's important to clarify that this addresses ordinary negligence only, not gross negligence. No one is asking to be relieved from the responsibility of preventing gross negligence.
Yeah, thank you.
I can echo from the Oregon Recreation and Park Association that our legislative committee, this is the #1 priority. We do have a lobbyist on contract in Salem who is in active conversations regarding this and working on draft language to fix the bills. Actually, both have been in the various threads I've seen. Recreational liability and immunity have both come up in conversation with some of our representatives. The Fields versus Newport case, one of the biggest issues that we found was that what that particular case did was it basically allowed the plaintiff to define whether or not what they were doing was considered recreating, and then also to define whether or not the trail is considered improved or unimproved. Those 2 things are also coming down the pipeline as far as the specifics of what's in this bill and how we need to basically close some loopholes. But the big thing about recreating for community is that if somebody is, in this particular case, this person wanted to recreate on the beach, but they did not consider the pathway from the parking lot to the beach to be considered recreation. And so the argument is, as long as it's not recreation, then you can go to the courts. If it is recreation, then there's, in theory, this immunity. The problem with that is recreation, as it may or may not be defined by a jury, is not the only reason why people use our trails. Walking, it has been argued, has been considered something not recreating if it is something your doctor has prescribed you to do more frequently. Folks will bike trails in order to commute from one place to another, in which case it is not technically recreating, is transportation. So these are some of the things that are coming down in language that I'm seeing, at least through our lobbyists. And I will start by, I should have started with this, which is that I am not a lobbyist. This is not my, not my wheelhouse. It is not something that I do not talk to representatives. That's why we have a paid lobbyist. So I am really just communicating the things that I'm hearing. But these are all things that are coming up in conversations over the last 2 weeks with our representatives. How are we really looking at the language of these existing bills or statutes, and how are we making sure that we are closing loopholes because of that language? So it's starting to look really nitpicky. And I think one of the things that's concerning about that is that anytime you start to get really nitpicky, then it's, well, what's the intent here? And is this really a fix? Or are we closing one loophole and just like then opening something else because we've used this language? So I think as we move forward, and it's a short session, so we'll move really quickly, I think it would be great for this group to really look at that language constantly, which I know is a lot of work, but really make sure that that actually does make sense, and that we're not fixing something over here to the detriment of something over here. I have a draft from my lobbyist right now, but that may change because, like Steph said, there's literally a hearing happening right now. So as soon as I get an update out of that, I'm sure we can send something out, or at least I can from our side, and I'm sure Steph can from her side, or Matt from his. So just throwing a couple things out there. I know that's not super helpful, but just the things I'm hearing.
No, it's very helpful. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, thanks everybody. I think this is just such kind of important dialogue. So thanks. And Chris, I'm not sure if you have anything else to share from kind of the OPRD side of things or not. It's okay if you don't, but I saw that you're on here, so.
You're muted, Chris.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. That's okay. That's all right. Thank you. Anybody have, Steph, I just saw you unmute. Do you have other information you want to add? I appreciate you putting the information on the webinar. Maybe that's what you were going to mention.
Yeah, at that webinar, we'll also have a general counsel for city county insurance and services. So anyone who has kind of questions about the nitty gritty of all this and related statutes and all that, that'll be a great opportunity for questions. I'll also share the link. Oregon Trails Coalition's hosting a Trails Day at the Capitol, February 12th. So I know we've got a mix of state employees and people wearing other hats on the call, but I'll just share that invitation for any individuals to participate. And or you know, if you can't participate as a legislative day participant, just would love to stay in communication with folks so that we're aligning our efforts with state agency questions, concerns, et cetera. So
Great. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. And any of those kinds of things that you want to share with the group, if you want to send those to me, and I'll make sure and get them out to the group anytime. I think that's a pretty good vehicle to make sure that we're all kind of staying up to date on this sort of thing. So feel free to send me those things, and I'll make sure to get it out to the entire group.
Yep. Can you hear me okay now?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. What I was going to say was talking with the Marine Board, Department of State Lands, Department of Forestry, Fish and Wildlife, along with the DOJ. So when I say I'll have more info in about a week and a half, it will be to let you know what I'm hearing from those other agencies, even though most of them have appointees on this group. And just to let you know what, state agencies, obviously we have, as far as our legislative involvement, we go through the governor's office. So as it rises to the governor's attention, we get either more or less freedom to participate, just seeking your understanding on that. The states it connects with this issue in a slightly different way because the state is self-insured. We don't have the same pressures and costs that regional and local providers do. And I think it's tempting to say, well, so that means the state doesn't have to care about this. The state does have to care about this, both in collaboration with local providers, because what hurts them hurts everybody, and because there is exposure to changes in the law, like what risk does that pose to us being able to continue to provide public service. So no one is just sort of sitting back and going, well, good luck. We're more engaged just because we take longer to get stuff done. It's going to take a little while to get you more feedback. So.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much. Any other thoughts or input or information?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan with Go Wild, tour company in Baker City, Eastern Oregon. I first heard about this, I think, 2 years ago at the Outdoor Rec conference when we first had our in-person meeting. And I still talk to a lot of like guides and outfitters and folks like myself running small businesses that haven't ever, don't really know much about this. And I'm still wrapping my head around it too. But is there a good place to direct people's attention to, or for like education purposes? I remember 2 years ago that we had like a sort of a sign up, a website, I think that maybe Matt gave, I can't remember who was sharing it, but yeah, any like educational resources to share among community?
I'll share the link to the Protect Oregon Recreation website, which was originally stood up to specifically address the recreational liability issue. And that has now been expanded to address liability and immunity as kind of, as I said before, kind of two sides of the same coin in terms of our outdoor recreation landscape in Oregon. So I'll pop that link in there. It's one resource for sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, and thanks, Steph, for the resource. All right. Anybody else before we move on? Well, thanks so much. Again, I appreciate the dialogue, and I think, not having been involved with this group as long as you all have, I think it's just a good place for us to share that and just kind of keep that discussion going. So thank you. Next on the agenda, I had next steps for the Office of Outdoor Recreation. If you were at the summit, the Outdoor Recreation Summit in the fall, you heard Lisa get up and say that we were starting to work and engage with other agencies, kind of garnering broader support. I mentioned that at our last meeting in October as well, both looking internal of how can Oregon State Parks better support the Office of Outdoor Recreation, but also how can we make sure that we're working well and garnering support from our agency partners too, along with kind of out into the broader recreation spectrum in Oregon. So those conversations have been happening. Again, I don't have a ton of update other than, we had mentioned that we would make sure and get work towards getting the position filled this first quarter in 2024, which is now, and we're going to live up to that promise. The timeline, it looks like things are on track for that. So I will be sure to keep you all updated on that process. I think, especially based on the discussion we just had, there's definitely some urgency, among other things, but to get this position filled, it's a pretty critical position, especially when it comes to those sorts of conversations. So I don't know if I'll try and answer any questions around that, but just know that we're on track to yeah, absolutely. I don't have it posted. It's not posted yet, but when I get it posted, I'll make sure to get it out to you all, so that you can send it out to all the folks that you know. I think you're all aware that the broader the audience, usually the better applicant pool we get. So I'll be sure to do that when we get to that point. Thank you.
So Matt, a quick question on that. And
Sure.
Hi, everybody. Has the job description been revised? And if so, who is working on that?
At this point, it's not been revised.
Okay.
I think those duties are largely the same. There may be a little bit, there's kind of the difference between a position description and what somebody actually does once they're in the position. I think some of the work that was done with the governor's task force is really going to help continue to drive, some of what that position works on, including like the recreational community or immunity conversation and those sorts of things. But at this point, we haven't made any changes to the position description.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If we do, and again, I'll keep the group up to date on that as we get towards recruitment.
Matt, can
Yeah.
you, Laura with Oregon Department of Forestry, can you remind me what classification that's going out as?
It's an OPA 4, an Operations Policy Analyst 4.
Yeah. Okay,
If I'm not
thanks.
mistaken. I'm going to look to Katie and Chris to make sure I'm right on that, but I'm 99% sure that that's the classification.
Copy, thanks.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you. Okay. I just had a few other kind of announcements, and then I figured we could open up for discussion around other topics. The first was I want to thank folks that reached out saying that they would be willing to work on the charter. I didn't send that information out because of holidays, workload, those kinds of things. I'm going to send that out to you all on Tuesday, along with a doodle poll, so that we can get some time together to start working on that. I think the time is good that we can hopefully get something pretty well set up before we even get the position in place. And so I think that should move pretty quick. So please be on the lookout for that. And thank you again for your willingness to help. I also wanted to just give a quick update on the Oregon State Park side of things. Like I mentioned at our meeting in October, we are hiring a statewide trails planner. The interviews are complete. I believe the position has been offered. I haven't heard back on whether or not the person accepted, but we're really close to having that position filled. And I'm hoping we could probably have them in place, gosh, I would think before mid-February if the offer is being made at this time, and just depending on what kind of notice they might need to give. So more to come on that, but I'm pretty excited to get that position in place. And then the last thing that I just wanted to mention before we go to kind of a roundtable or information sharing is an FYI, and I'm not sure that it has as much to do with outdoor recreation, but I still think it's important. The week between January 22nd and 31st is the point in time count. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a federal requirement that states count individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And so the reason that this week is important is they're working to reduce displacement during that time so that they can get a more accurate count of folks that are experiencing this. And so I just wanted to pass that on, not because it may not affect you in your day-to-day work, but just something good to know, I think, is you're out in parks or out in public lands knowing that is happening. So I just wanted to share that with the group. And with that, I would open it up to any kind of a roundtable or questions that folks might have. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. It's Friday afternoon, and I am sorry again about that being the time for this meeting, but when I sent out the doodle poll, that was the best attendance we could get. But I'm sure folks are probably ready to be done with the week. If your week's anything like mine, you're ready to be done with the week.
Yeah, Matt, just something I want to bring up as an awareness and maybe a concern that I know a few of us have had. We, as council members, have gotten assigned workday trainings for harassment, information security, some other ones. I know at least 3 or 4 of us have gotten the email, so I assume we all have. We are able to access certain trainings, but not others. So I know that I was able to access the harassment training. I think Amanda was as well. There's at least one of those trainings, though, that we don't seem to have access to, but we keep getting emails that we need to complete them. Specifically for myself, I've been unable to access the information and security training. Amanda, I'm not sure which one you're having the issue with. Is it the same?
Yeah, it was the same.
Okay.
But yes, so I'm not sure how we get around that. I think we need to be given access to a new group or something within the state's workday system. But if we can get some assistance on that, I think I've emailed you and worked with Denise, and I think Amanda has worked with you and Denise as well, but we haven't been able to find those.
Okay, thanks so much for bringing that up, Melissa, because I meant to mention that to the group because I did get a couple of emails, and I think, Amanda, I'm not sure if you're the one that figured it out, but it turns out it's somebody from DAS that controls some of those. And so thank you, Amanda, because I was able to forward some of that information to Mick, and I'm hoping that helped. But if that's not solving it, let me know, and I'll go ahead and work with, I think it was, I've got the email to be able to get a hold of the folks over at DAS now. But if that's not being resolved, I'm happy to reach out to them and work on getting that figured out.
Yeah, I got an email from DAS saying that it was like a different account type is what we needed because we wouldn't otherwise be able to see that thing. But that just happened, I think, yesterday. And I haven't gone in since. I mean, I'm just like everyone, I think, just been busy. I haven't updated it yet. But yeah, that might be something to look into, is maybe it's an account type. So for those who have had trouble or maybe haven't had time to troubleshoot it, that, starting at that place.
I tried again last night and yeah, it's still not resolved. I actually can't get in. But I also learned that we have a whole year to complete them, so maybe we're not too rushed.
I find if I put things off, then I forget. So I'm going to go ahead and get a hold of DAS just to try and make sure that it gets straightened out for you all.
Terrific.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up again. I had meant to mention it to see if that had been resolved, because from the last email I saw, it sounded like perhaps it had been, but it sounds like it has not. Okay, great, thank you. Anything else? I know it's cold across the state, so stay warm as you're out playing. I think we hit 14 as a high in LeGrand today, so it's cooling down for sure.
No, it's like low 40s in Portland. That's it. I'm like an indoor kid at that point. But it is technically snowing outside my window in Portland.
Wow.
So everyone stay safe, maybe off the roads if you're in the metro area or the Willamette Valley.
Amanda, where are you? Because I'm in Southwest Portland and I don't have snow right now.
I'm in Southeast. It's coming and going. It's been in flurries. Nothing's sticking yet.
Okay, well, thank you all again. Happy New Year. Let me know if you need anything in the meantime, or if you want me to share information, and I will get back to you all on the DAS training, just so that we can get that squared away for you. Thanks so much for a good conversation today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to see everyone.
You
Thanks,
too.
Matt, for drawing us together.
Everybody.